everyone, thank you for tuning in. If you're new here, my name is Laurie. I'm the mom of an 18-month-old boy named Kainoa, and I make some videos on YouTube occasionally just sharing random bits and pieces of my motherhood journey and things like that. So if that's something you're interested in, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you're already subscribed, then thank you for being on this journey with me. In today's video, I want to share a little bit more about my postpartum mental health. So I did one video really just focusing on the birth trauma aspect of postpartum for me. So I'll link that up here and down below as well if you want to watch that. And then if you obviously want to know like more about my pregnancy and my birth, I did film like a whole pregnancy story and birth story as well that I will leave in the description box as well. So if you want the full story, start there, but I'll go over some specific stuff. So in today's video, I want to address specifically the pregnancy and postpartum like anxiety and OCD I've experienced, because it was one of the biggest things that has happened to me postpartum. So yeah, and obviously I'm just sharing my story here, so any kind of experience that you might have with any of these like might be completely different from mine. So yeah, keep that in mind. And one other thing is like I actually did like a support group at some point, and the therapist that was running it was saying that sometimes, especially for OCD and like postpartum OCD, hearing other people's triggers can be triggering. Like it can create more triggers for you. So if you're still like in the thick of it, I would probably wait and watch this video later, because I will talk about specific triggers for me, and I just don't want them to impact you. Or you can watch very cautiously, and if this is like triggering anything in you, then just stop. Two books I really want to recommend before we hop into it, because they've helped me tremendously, are Dropping the Baby and Other Scary Thoughts and Good Mothers Have Scary Thoughts, both by Kleiman. And lastly, I want to say, like, on top of those books, like those books were very helpful, but I did work with a therapist one-on-one with these issues, and I did do like a postpartum support group as well. So I had a lot of different resources to help me through these. So getting into it, one thing is kind of understanding where my scary thoughts come from. And by scary thoughts, it's like the intrusive thoughts, the things that are very triggering to me, right? And some of it comes from genetics. So my parents have both a history of depression. My dad has a history of anxiety. And so obviously I got some genetic components to it. Biology, you know, I gave birth a few months ago, and I had a traumatic birth. My body's health was in jeopardy, and now I'm breastfeeding, and I have my own even personal history with anxiety and depression. And so all of those things, the hormones, just all the things contribute to it, right? Then there's thinking. So I'm a very complex human, like probably most people. So I'm a perfectionist, you know. I have a big need for control and a tendency to ruminate. I have difficulty coping with adversity sometimes and discomfort. I definitely overestimate threat and inflate responsibility all the time. I have a strong intolerance for uncertainty and poor problem orientation, apparently. So those are things that I've noted in the past while I was gearing up for this. And all of that obviously is combined with stress, the lack of support that we had here, because we didn't have any family anywhere near us to help us with the baby, plus COVID, you know, COVID happened. So no support system whatsoever. Me and my husband, at least I had him, thank God, but I was still low on support. And then 9-month postpartum, husband went back to work, so that was obviously adding on to the stress. Then there's also the lack of time to do things, and also a big thing for me was social media comparison, spending so much time online, you know, being at home all the time and just comparing to other moms online. So that leads to scary thoughts, obsessive thoughts, and excessive worry. So yeah, so that's like kind of the starting point of where my scary thoughts are coming from. And so I had a lot of anxiety in my pregnancy because of my miscarriage mostly. So as I've mentioned in several videos probably, I had a miscarriage about maybe 6 months before, or not even 6 months, probably like 4 or 5 months before I conceived Kainoa. And so like I spent most of my pregnancy worried about losing the pregnancy, about my baby not being okay. So it was definitely manageable, but just something that was in the back of my mind often. Like I would kind of obsessively poke on my belly to make sure that he was alive whenever he wasn't moving, because I was like a little bit scared whenever he wouldn't kick for an hour, but he was just sleeping obviously, but I would be scared. And then I was very worried until I could feel kicks in the first place. And then I think I spent my entire pregnancy, like from like day 1 to like day 300 and something, like always looking when I wiped to make sure I wasn't bleeding, I wasn't spotting, because that was the first sign of my miscarriage last time. So that was like kind of an obsessive thing I did, like I just always looked. And I guess lastly, like during pregnancy, is mostly like during birth, I also had a lot of fear that my baby wouldn't be alive. So even like way prior to the C-section, I was just like very afraid. And then obviously his health was not the greatest when he was born. Went to the NICU for like a couple weeks, and so created a lot more fears. And so postpartum, I had a lot of fears, and that's kind of where I'm gonna focus on today, like mostly like the postpartum aspect of it. So my main intrusive thoughts postpartum was that my baby would stop breathing. I was deadly afraid he would die, and SIDS and all that stuff. It could definitely be because like the first thing I heard about my son is like he's not breathing when I was on the operating table, unable to do anything. Before they took him to the NICU, and breathing was something they were concerned with him, like the most of the time he was at the NICU, so, or at least at the beginning. So yeah, that definitely probably caused that to be the main focus for me. So when we got home, we got the outlet because he was plugged in on a bunch of monitors, making sure he was okay at the hospital, and that was honestly reassuring, you know. But when we got home, all of a sudden there's nothing telling me if he's okay. So having the outlet definitely contributed to I mean, it entertained my neuroticism in a way, but it did make me feel better and a little bit less anxious. But even though he had the outlet all night long, and for his naps, whenever he wasn't on me, because we did contact naps so I could watch him, I would still actually put my hand on his belly, or like focus hard in the dark to like look at his belly and make sure it was rising and falling. Like that was something I did for a long time. So I would barely sleep because I was always watching. I also spent basically the whole first year of his life sitting in the back seat with him, predominantly when we were in the car. Predominantly so I could watch and make sure he was still breathing. Especially if he fell asleep, I would always be watching his belly rise and fall to make sure he was still breathing, because I'd read somewhere some story about somebody's baby who died in their car seat while they were driving, and so I was like very, very concerned about that. Yeah, it took me several months before I could even drive him alone, and even though driving with a screaming infant is like the worst, at least I knew he was alive when he was screaming, so it was okay. And then when he would like fall asleep, I would be so anxious. I'd be constantly looking like in the mirror, looking at the mirror, and I don't know, I feel like it was like less safe because I was always staring at him instead of at the road because I was always looking at him instead of looking at the road, you know. It was probably not the best. We contact napped for a while. So at first he would sleep with me like on the recliner, like I wasn't sleeping, but like he would sleep on me on the recliner while I was doing things like phone, watching TV or whatever, reading books. And then after a while, like several months, probably like when it was like 6 months or something, I started putting him to nap in our bed. We co-slept, so which I know some people are gonna say like SIDS, but no, we did it as safely as possible, and so to me it wasn't really a SIDS risk and did not contribute to my anxiety. But anyways, but for his naps I would put the outlet on, but actually for the first like few months that he was napping in the bed, I still stayed in the bedroom with him. So I'd sit in the bed and just like do things like on my phone or computer or whatever in the dark while he slept on the bed. So I still wouldn't leave the room while he was there. And I think it was like probably close to a year old when I started leaving the room when he was asleep in our bed. And I think like that whole like anxiety around his breathing like really did not subside mostly until 1 year old, when like Sid's risk like mostly fall. I mean, I think it like decreased. Like it was definitely at its worst at the very beginning, and then like slowly tapered off, I'd say, because the last few months like I was definitely way less neurotic about it, but I would still be like we went to travel somewhere and I brought the outlet, but then I didn't realize like that because it has to be on Wi-Fi and the hotel Wi-Fi, like it wasn't gonna work. And so he didn't have the outlet for the first time. I just like spent the whole night staring at him, and that was like probably when he was like 6 months, 7 months old. Like, so I was still very anxious at that point, probably. Yeah. Another big issue I've had postpartum was separation anxiety with him. So I couldn't actually leave him with his dad, even to take a shower, without being super anxious and hearing like phantom cries or real cries, but just always very anxious and feeling extreme mom guilt, which I'm gonna unpack a little bit more in the next segment of this like mini series of like my postpartum mental health. But yeah, I would have extreme mom guilt if I had to leave him like for an hour to go to an appointment or something like that. It was just like always feeling like I had to be right next to him at all times. So obviously there was a lot of other tiny little things, but like those were definitely the main ones. Now, in the book Dropping Your Baby and Other Scary Thoughts that I mentioned at the beginning, there is a section at the very end after you read the whole book to come up with your own treatment plan, to come up with your own personal treatment plan. And so that's something I did, and that was kind of helpful, like really like almost like self-prescribing myself things, if that makes sense. And I like that. I'm that kind of person, I guess. Yeah. So basically like that treatment plan helps you like understanding kind of your particular areas of vulnerability, as they say. So it helps you kind of get a better picture of yourself and how to treat yourself and intervene and what you will need, right? So from the book, the things that I benefited from the most were the scary thought log, which is like a journaling technique, as well as just journaling and talking through my main triggers. And then taking some time to take care of myself for exercising, meditating, sleeping, eating better food also helped. Yeah, I also tried to like focus a little bit on acceptance, which was one of the chapters in the book. So basically in that context, acceptance is kind of like recognizing that like you may not be able to completely avoid having scary thoughts, but kind of learning to live with them and understanding that they're a part of your experience. So they just like feel like a lesser impact, like a lesser negative impact in a way. So anyways, I found that helpful because I still have intrusive thoughts, but now I don't see them as like me being broken as much, and just like a part of what I'm going through, if that makes sense. And like I said, I did do therapy. I'm not really gonna go into it, but I did a bunch of therapy for that, like just like working through it and like, you know, finding ways to reframe and all things, and just talking through it. Honestly, talking through their problems sometimes make them lesser. And then also did like a 6-week support group, like postpartum support group, probably when I was like 4 or 5 months postpartum. I don't remember. I think I talked about it in my postpartum updates, but I don't actually remember. But I think it was before Kainoa was crawling, because he was on me the whole time. So yeah. Anyways, I think that pretty much covers it. I do want to make like a 3rd part to this series, talking about like kind of my experience of extreme mom guilt and like a little bit of like the struggles in our relationship postpartum because of all my mental health stuff. So I'll make that very soon, so stay tuned for that, I guess. But yeah, So I don't know, if you have experienced anything similar and you want to like chat about it, you can find me on Instagram at _Laurie Lo, or just chat in the comments. I'll try to get back to you. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all later. Bye!